Hello, bees, and welcome to Guest and Gusto, SCAD's virtual series of conversations and digital content with creators and innovators remaking culture. So I'm Melanie Moore, a professor of fashion and beauty marketing management, and here at SCAD. And today we're joined by Linda Wells. So Linda has actually been at SCAD before with our SCAD style, and we're very happy to have her back. So Linda has more than 35 years of experience in beauty as a journalist, a brand founder, a brand builder. And so while serving as Revlon's chief creative officer, she created and launched Flesh Beauty. So this is a prestige makeup brand. And prior to Revlon, she was the founding editor-in-chief of the beauty magazine Allure, which she has helmed for over 25 years. So New York Magazine called her the most authoritative and crucial voice on beauty. And having met Linda, I would absolutely have to agree with that. And Refinery 29 also referred to her as the guiding light in the industry. Linda created Flesh Beauty in less than a year and brought 96 products to the market exclusively at Ulta Beauty stores in 2018. So the brand's products, advertising, and social media have been commended for excellence by Refinery 29, Elle, In Style, Allure, The Today Show, and The Cut, just to name a few. So Google also acknowledged Flesh Beauty's YouTube videos as best-in-class content in 2018. And the Tribe Dynamics named Flesh the #1 new brand and earned media value that same year. So she's going to be here to talk to us today about the role that beauty plays in our lives and how to create and sustain a brand through challenging times. So welcome to our guest and gusto, Linda.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So before you get started, I just want to highlight that we have a poll, and it's just a little fun poll, and we want the students to select. And the question is, what recommendations do you want to know from Linda during these interesting times? So this will be available. Also, some of the student guests will have an opportunity to win prizes. So we will have a presentation from Linda, and then we will open it up to questions. So I'll hand it over to you.
So hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Melanie. I can't believe that I was at SCAD just a little over a year ago, and how much the world has changed since then. It could have been 50 years ago for all I know.
Yeah, but it feels like
it was an amazing experience, and I was so inspired by the students and everyone. So thank you for having me. And I will launch right in and talk to you a little bit about beauty. And I think what I'm going to say too applies to fashion and to a lot of endeavors. So here we go. I think I'm going to start with the end, which is kind of the elephant in the room. And how can we be talking about beauty and fashion and creativity right now when we're in a time of despair and the pandemic and economic hardships, and beauty just seems so trivial right now. And I know, having been through 9/11 in New York City, I know how hard it is to sort of face something that seems so trivial at a time like this when everything feels more life and death. And on the morning of 9/11, I was supposed to go to the Oscar de la Renta show, which seemed completely ridiculous when we were going through what we were going through. But as the weeks progressed after the attacks, and I think as time goes on with what we're going through now, you realize that beauty and fashion and creativity provide so much in the way of hope and optimism, and how they're necessary for our spirit. And even doctors will say that they know that patients are ready to be discharged from the hospital when they start to care about the way they look. So beauty is the way we present ourselves to the world, the way we view ourselves. And I don't think it's trivial when it's such an important part of health and optimism. Beauty is a cultural force, and this is actually an ad that we did for Allure in 1990 before the magazine came out. And this image is a painting from about a little over 100 years ago, and we said in the ad copy, 100 years ago, women would have killed for this body. Now, the point is that beauty changes, that culture and beauty are highly interconnected. And that's such an important part of what beauty is. It's also, when I look at this ad, I think, wow, what an ancient cultural artifact it is, the ad itself, because no one in the world would ever talk about killing for a body right now, when there's a time of body acceptance and body positivity. You know, that's an ancient concept, thank God. And also, beauty is a human impulse. This is another ad in that series, and this is a shot by Irving Penn of a tribesman from New Guinea. And the idea here is that beauty is a really personal form of expression, and what one person finds appealing, somebody else might not. And this is their idea of the mud pack. But that human impulse is such an important part, regardless of your culture. And beauty is revolutionary. This is a woman in a Mao costume or Mao uniform, and back in China in the day when communism and Mao ruled, and 6 million women used to carry the little red book, and now they carry a little red lipstick. And this idea that beauty can be an expression of rebellion, of identity, of joining or of not joining, and I think it's a really important part, and it really can be revolutionary as we see through history. So beauty is as personal as a fingerprint. And so this is my personal beauty story. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career and how I got started and where I went from there. My first job out of college was at Vogue, and I was hired to join the beauty department as an editorial assistant. And I didn't really have a particular interest in beauty. In fact, I think my only piece of makeup was under eye concealer and maybe mascara. But once I got kind of connected to those ideas that I just mentioned, the cultural importance and the emotional aspect of beauty, it became a much more interesting thing. But in fact, what I was doing as an editorial assistant was getting people coffee and taking their dogs for walks and fixing the copying machine. It was not a very fancy life at all, but I worked all the time. I doubled my salary in overtime. I ate hors d'oeuvres at press events for dinner and managed to survive. And I worked so hard that I worked my way up to become a writer and an editor in the beauty department. And I did that for 5 years. And then I went to the New York Times, and I was a reporter on the paper, and went from there to the New York Times Magazine, where I was the beauty editor. And the challenge of being at the Times then was they didn't ever have a beauty editor at the magazine. And I didn't want the beauty pages to be sort of the dumb pages and surrounded by all this intelligence and big thinking about politics and wars and all these, you know, important things. So I decided I had to report about differently and write about beauty differently. And I looked at the cultural aspects, the emotional aspects, the behavioral aspects, and then also sprinkled in a little bit of business information. And so I made beauty into something different. I wanted it to be journalistic. And then while I was at the New York Times Magazine, the food editor quit, and I volunteered to do that as well. So I ended up having 2 jobs. They were really 2 amazing jobs. They seemed very contradictory, but they actually kind of weirdly had connections, or maybe I chose to see that. But so I did that for 4 years. And then I got a call from Cy Newhouse, who owned Condé Nast Publications, and he said that he wanted to start a beauty magazine, and would I be the editor of that magazine? And so of course I said yes. And he had that was it. That was his only advice to me: start a beauty magazine, make it journalistic. So I wanted it to have the journalism of the Times with the visual excellence of Vogue, the 2 places I'd worked. And so off I went, and it was a challenge right from the beginning, because you're starting something from scratch, you're making it all up as you go along. And I also had to attract people to work there. And we got an art department together. We had a very esteemed art director who was really respected, had only really worked in men's magazines. And he came over, and we thought this would be interesting. And he went into his office and would lock the door, design the pages, and then come out and say, I'm done. And it was like, oh, well, that's not really the way we work. But we all were so mystified by it and kind of just speechless about it that we went along with it. And so he created this prototype, which was what we were going to take to advertise, to show them so that they might advertise in the magazine. And we printed about 20,000 copies. And Cy Newhouse called me into his office, and he said, you know what, we're going to we're not going to distribute these. We're actually going to shred them all. And I thought, okay, could I please be shredded as well? But he said, it's just not good enough. It doesn't look right. And we're going to fire the art department and we'll keep you, which was a little alarming because I didn't really think I had any right to stay, but there you have it. I guess I got lucky, and we'll start all over again. So we had to get rid of everything, including a whole bunch of t-shirts, like hundreds of t-shirts that we had that were made with the old logo for Allure, because we were changing the logo. So one night I was coming home from work and it was like 10 or 11 o'clock, and I look out the window of the car and it's pouring rain, and there is a giant drunken man wheeling around the street wearing an Allure t-shirt. I was like, this is cruel. This is like the worst insult. I called a friend who lived in the neighborhood and I'm like, who is this guy? And she said, oh yeah, that's Lenny. And I said, would you please go outside and give Lenny a new t-shirt, preferably one that says L on it or some other magazine, but not Allure. So that was a kind of hilarious little blip in our career. And then in starting the magazine, it was hard to get people to work there. And I was always trying to talk photographers in. It was easier getting writers, but photographers was tough. And while I was trying to get all these photographers, I got a memo. They didn't have email then. A memo from another editor at another magazine at Condé Nast. I'm not going to name who it is. And this editor said, I wish you the best, but the following photographers are exclusive to my magazine. And it was 3 pages long, single spaced, of every single photographer you've heard of, you've never heard of, who had never worked at that magazine, but hoped they would one day. So we had no one, zero, except one photographer. And he was Stephen Meisel, who happened to be the best, but we were very lucky to have him, but he couldn't shoot the whole magazine. So I learned something very valuable in that process. We ended up bringing in assistants to photographers, like Irving Penn's assistant. He would work late at night. We'd moonlight with everybody. We took paparazzi pictures and we brought them. We had makeup artists shooting things for us. And the lesson I learned was that when you have a bad photograph, make it big. And when it's really, really bad, stick a whole bunch of type on it and make it big. And that ended up creating a style for Allure that we never would have arrived at had I not had my hands tied with photographers. So I'm actually grateful for that memo and for those limitations. And I think that it's kind of a lesson to any of us that the most creative output often comes with great limitations. And I remember, I believe it was Frank Gehry's had some project, the architect, and he was working on it and had no budget. And because the budget was limitless, he said he did his worst creation. And I think that budget, all kinds of limitations really kind of bring out your creativity. So I launched Allure in March of 1991. And this is the June issue. And the lesson I have in this is to really dive in and to go do more and go big. And that was my point of view on my career, was really dive in. And when I learned my mistakes of kind of ceding control over the prototype, I realized that I had to take ownership and really make my own decisions on my own, for my own reasons. And if they weren't good, then at least I would go down with my own ideas as opposed to someone else's that I didn't believe in. So, but this cover illustrates the go big part, because when we launched Allure, we made the magazine supersize. It was giant. It was big, bigger than anything else that was out there. And it was so distinctive, and it was so exciting to have all that great size, but it didn't fit in the newsstand slots. So we couldn't put it on the newsstand. And then advertisers had to change their creative to fit the proportions of the magazine. So other than the fact that we couldn't get on the newsstand and didn't have any advertising, it was a great idea. So we realized that if we actually wanted to have a business at all, we would have to go and make it standard size, which we did not long after this issue. But it was really fun while it lasted. And that's a Stephen Meisel image of Linda Evangelista on the cover. Another important lesson was focus on the audience, even when that seems risky. And I think it's really true in anything. Unless you're a true artist, I think that focusing on the audience, your consumer, your reader, your user, whatever that is really important. And thinking like that person, in my case, thinking like the reader. And the cover that I'm showing as an illustration for this is from one of our Best of Beauty issues. And we started Best of Beauty in 1996. No other magazine had a Best of Beauty Awards. And I decided to do it because I actually went shopping for beauty products. And when I got to the store, I realized it's impossible. There's everything under the sun, and you have no way of knowing what's good, what works, what doesn't work. It's just this sea of stuff. And that sounds kind of obvious, but when you're a beauty editor, you don't go shopping much. You actually get every single product sent to you free at your office. So you don't have to make those shopping decisions. And I decided that if I could come up with a way to give awards to the very best shampoo or mascara or eyeshadow, et cetera, then that would really help the consumer and the reader find things. Cy Newhouse, the owner of Condé Nast, thought that I was committing career suicide by doing this because he said, the advertisers are going to be furious. You're going to give one company the best mascara, and what about all the other companies? And he let me go with it anyway, and I stuck with it. And it was risky at the beginning. A lot of advertisers were furious. I was quite accustomed to having furious advertisers on my phone, but the consumers and the readers loved it so much, and they bought products based on the list. And as a result, it ended up boosting the business. So it ended up being really a good thing for business. And then every other magazine ended up doing it. We created a Best of Beauty seal. It was a red seal that still exists. And we did that just because we liked the way it looked, and we thought it'd be nice to have that on the cover and kind of draw attention to the issue. And it turned out that advertisers wanted to use that seal on their winning products. And the publisher thought, oh, wait a second, we could charge the advertisers for using the seal. And that created a licensing business that was a really important revenue stream and has remained so today. So what started out to be risky because the audience wanted it ended up being a really good thing. And then listen to smart people. It makes you smarter. And my philosophy was always to hire people who were smarter than me, which was not a difficult thing to do, but smarter and more talented in all their different fields. And it ends up just lifting everybody. In this case, the smart person who was talking to me was Mario Testino. And he is a photographer, and he was sort of early in his career working for Allure, among others. And he said, I found this incredible model. You're not going to believe it. She's amazing. She's from Brazil. She's so extraordinary. We have to put her on the cover. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know whether she's really cover material. Well, I listened to Mario, and this is Giselle's first cover in the US. She's the one on the left. I said, let's do her with somebody else because we needed a famous person on the cover. And that's the woman on the right who no one remembers, but it's Orally. And so this is Giselle's first cover. And I'm very happy that I listened to someone smarter than me, who is Mario Testino. And then it's really important to be open to new talent and new ideas, new trends, new solutions. And I feel like that's so much of what we do is like keep ourselves open to the newness. This happens to be Beyonce's first cover outside of Destiny's Child when she was off on her own. Her first cover after that wasn't a music magazine, and we were so lucky to get her on our first cover. And I also was thinking about Rihanna because the Met Ball would have been last night, and Rihanna is so known for her red carpet Met Ball moments. And I texted our creative director from Allure, and I said, remember Rihanna's first Met Ball? She came with me, and she was very shy. She just made I saw a music video of her doing Pon de Replay, and I was like, oh my gosh, this girl's amazing. So we asked her to come. She wore a white gown. She wore like bicycle gloves with the fingerless gloves, kind of like what Karl Lagerfeld wore. And she sat there and almost said nothing the whole time. And she definitely wasn't a phenomenon on the red carpet, but we were so lucky to have her and lucky to have her on our cover in those early days. So the new talent is important, but it's also important not to dismiss the not so new. And this, of course, is Julia Roberts, who was well established when we put her on this cover. And there's the Allure Best of Beauty seal. You can see how we added that to the cover. But I think about how in our world, in beauty and in fashion and in a lot of creative endeavors, the new is what's exciting, and everybody pays attention to the new, and everybody gives the new device, the new app, the new everything, the new product is the thing that's exciting. But there's also established brands and established people who actually have a lot to add. And I think that it's important to bring the two of those together. And I kind of think the perfect example of that is Karl Lagerfeld, who was designing into his 80s when he died. And he always knew what the codes for Chanel were, which, you know, the tweed, the pearls, the chain, the quilting. And he took those, and every season he reconfigured them and reimagined them for something new. And his runway shows were always the most exciting runway shows, and partly because he knew how to combine old and new together. And one thing I've learned in my career is be exacting, but avoid the trap of perfection. I think that we all believe that perfection is the ultimate goal, but it can be treacherous, really. And I think in beauty, it's true because nobody's perfect, and it's dangerous to promote perfect anything in beauty. Perfect skin, perfect brows, perfect body. Certainly, that's dangerous. And in work, I think that the desire to make everything perfect is really the enemy of progress and the enemy of excitement. And it causes inertia that you never want to let something go. You always want to think you can make it just a little bit better. But what that does is often make something meaningless and overwrought. So I really believe in it being exacting, making things as good as they can be, but then not worrying about perfection. And it's a lesson that I had to learn as a magazine editor, but it's something that served me really well in being a brand founder too. And then embrace the colorful. And I think about how much more joyous beauty and fashion became when we moved away from all the neutrals and everything being black and a single idea of beauty into something that was more varied and more interesting and had more nuance and more excitement to it. So color has really brought us into a whole different world, and I think that it's a great advantage right now. So I left Allure after 25 years, and I went to Revlon as the chief creative officer. And while I was there, I worked on the rebranding of Revlon with the tagline "Live Boldly," and hired a new group of models, including Ashley Graham and Adwoa Boa, and worked on ads that got people out of the studio, got the models out of the studio into the world and into life. And it was full of energy and a lot of fun. And the CEO at the time wanted to start a prestige makeup brand following the indie beauty model, which meant fast to market, a real point of view, and a very small team, very lean and mean. So I said, I want to do this. I raised my hand. And so I created Flesh, and I really came up with the name immediately because I wanted it to be about skin and about the fleshiness, but I also wanted it to have more meaning than that. And I thought about how flesh was often used to mean one color. And once upon a time, there was a crayon in the crayon box that was called Flesh, and it was peachy beige. And even when I was a tiny kid and I saw that flesh color and could read, I realized that's not flesh, that's just one person's skin color. So I thought about this and how really wanted flesh to be every shade of flesh, not just one. And one of the ads that we did was this idea of this was Flesh Color, the doll, and how the doll not only was this oppressive body shape, and that has been written about, we actually wrote about it in the first issue of Allure, but the coloration of her was like, that's not flesh color. So the idea of questioning stereotypes and history and assumptions was really important in doing Flesh, but I think it's important in also doing Allure, in doing anything, to think about more and what the meaning of what you're putting out there is. And then we did one with the Band-Aid, and you think about the fact that when you're a little kid and your mom puts a Band-Aid on your knee, that you're registering somewhere in your subconscious that maybe this doesn't match you, or really you don't match it. And what does that mean to you, and how, and the kind of message that sends to you. And maybe you don't understand it when you first see it, but it's really a powerful thing. And so I thought it was important always to re-examine universal norms in everything that I do, including Flesh. So then it's also important to remember to make it human, that everything that we do in beauty and fashion is about the people who use and wear what we make. And everything is meaningless until a human touches it and makes it his or her own and interacts with it. And sometimes I think that designers and creators and business people forget the human aspect of what they're producing. And really without it, our work is useless. So now I'm going to show you the videos that Melanie mentioned in her introduction to me so nicely. Thank you, Melanie. The videos that we did for Flesh for the launch. And I worked with a brand new creative agency called Look Studios. And it was two people, Andrew Gold and Susie Shaheen, who came out of Vogue.com and started their own agency. And I immediately went to them and I wanted to do something that had a lot of different people in it. We had a tiny budget. We had 13 models, and I wanted people to be indoors and outdoors and playing with makeup and acting and moving and talking and being human beings, which you'll see. And you also might recognize the song, which at the time no one had heard of. So I will play this video right now.
I do my hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Woo, child, tired of the bullshit. Gone, dust your shoulders off. Keep it moving, yes, Lord. Trying to get some new shit in there. Swimwear, going to the pool shit. Come now, come dry your eyes. You know you a star, you can touch the sky. I know that it's hard, but you have to try. If you need advice, let me simplify. If he don't love you anymore, just walk your fine ass out the door.
We're like one tone.
I do my hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling?
I'm digging it, and I'm applying it, and it's blending, and I'm trying it.
Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? And we gon' make you hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Feeling good as hell. Baby, how you feeling?
So those were our ads, and that was our master ad. And from there, we did about 30 different cut downs in 30 different ways using all images from that original campaign. And that was Lizzo, the song that we had never heard of that now you can't not hear. And Lizzo wanted to be in the ad, and we couldn't afford her, and she was so inexpensive, and I just could kick myself, but we had the tiniest budget. And it would have been amazing to have Lizzo in that ad. But those ads did really, really well for us, and we did them on YouTube and Instagram and everything else. It was just a lot of fun. And then we did these other cut downs for Instagram that were product animation, and I'll play that one of those. We did tons of them, but I'll play one for now. So we couldn't afford music at that point, so we just used sounds. And I love the way that there are sounds that actually exist in your life, like a zipper or a pop top can or a doorbell or a vinyl record. So it was so much fun to kind of have those sounds that have some place in your memory, but you're not quite sure what they are. And but we did lots of those, and that was really great. And then in creating Flesh, which we did really quickly, it was really important to be decisive and discerning. And actually that was true at Flesh and at Allure. And it's, I think, the most important quality for me as a leader is to be decisive and discerning. And it's the idea of editing and selecting and knowing who you are, what your brand is, and what belongs there and what doesn't belong. And what your territory is, and communicating that both internally and externally. And so we created, in 3 months, we had the name Flesh, the name of all the products, the product assortment, the logo, the packaging, and the identity. That's really, really fast. But the only way we could have done it was because we were decisive and discerning. And then I think in what we do, particularly in beauty, is you want to make it delicious. I think that beauty is like candy. And we create things that people don't need for survival. They want because they're part of desire and because of expression. And so it has to be tempting. And I love things to be luscious, to feel touchable, to be shiny, to kind of have these glossy, glowing things that just draw you in and make you want to touch them and interact with them. And then it's always important to keep it simple. That's true regardless of what you're doing. I think that the messaging and the identity and the product has to be clearly explained. And it's not because people aren't smart, but it's because they are inundated with information and they just don't need complication. It's like real clarity is so important. In Flesh and in Allure, it was also important for me to be provocative and to provoke and to get people thinking and to get people talking. And we named product, I named a line Flesh, which was very polarizing and provocative. And I had names for, this is a highlighter named Vibrate. And I had Twitch, and I had a lipstick called Lick, and one called Moist, because moist apparently is the word that everybody hates almost as much as they hate Flesh. But I thought it's kind of a great name for a lipstick. I had a lipstick called Hungry and Gorge. But the idea, actually what's funny about this Lick lipstick is that Cardi B, because she has her song Lick, she posted about it, and we didn't have to pay her to post, which was pretty incredible for us. So, but it's this idea of like giving people something to talk about and surprise them and disarm them. And then it's important too for a brand to have a sense of humor, particularly about itself. Because we named the brand Flesh, we got a lot of crazy reactions, and there was a whole Reddit thread about how the line must have been created for zombies. So we decided to make a fake newspaper, and I wrote it using a lot of the reviews and commenting on all the terrible things that people said about the brand. And it was so much fun, and we gave it out to the media and to influencers, and it really kind of showed that we had a sense of humor about who we were, and we were in on the joke, not that we were clueless. And I think that throughout everything that you do all the time, particularly now, is to always keep thinking. Your work is never done, your brand is never created and finished and put away. You have to keep creating and keep reimagining things. And those are just extremely important for our own health and preservation. And kind of, if you're a creative person, you have to keep thinking and keep creating. And it's true for your brand. And I think also for beauty, it's such a source of joy and positivity. And we really need that now more than ever. So I thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So much of that resonated. As I am in class with my students, watching them bring the next or the future of beauty in their projects in the classroom, I'm always blown away. And so it's really interesting to hear what you say. It really resonates, especially in these times. But before we get to the question and answer session, which I have so many questions, and I'm sure many of you do, which you can enter into the Q&A section of the webinar. I just want to call out the poll that we had in the beginning. So the students are most interested in knowing what your favorite Flesh beauty product is.
Oh gosh, do I have to have one? Can I do more than one? I can't do one. I'll give you four. So there's a Fresh Flesh is a primer that I absolutely love. It is it's like it goes on so nice and cool, and it just makes your skin so perfect. I never cared one bit about a primer. I would try them because I felt obligated, like, oh, they're such a phenomenon, I really should try a primer. And I just thought this is an unnecessary thing until I discovered we created one, and I thought, oh, now I have a whole new point of view on primer. I love it. And then we have a newish product. Our newest product is, it has SPF 30, and it's very sheer, and it goes on like under your makeup, and it's so gorgeous, and it's completely sheer. So it's the most sheer sunscreen I've ever seen, and it has a primer faculty, and it also is moisturizing. So I love that product. I love the foundation sticks, and I use them all the time. When no one's looking, I use them. I find them so handy. Like, I like to just use my finger and apply things. They're good for concealer. They're good for contour. I'm not a contour person, but love those. And then those lipsticks that I showed, the one that was called Lick, that whole line, they're called Fleshy Lips. I love them. And the names are hilarious. I like Lick, Gorge, Hunger, but they feel so good on your lips. I'm not a lipstick person, so for me that's perfect. But we also have intense colors, as you saw.
Yes, they are beautiful. So thank you for that, and I'm excited to go to the Q&A section because I see that we do have a lot of questions coming in. I'm just going to start us off. And just thinking about, recently coming from the industry myself, I remember when color cosmetics started to take off. And for so long, we went through the skincare moment. There was a big serum that launched every 3 to 6 months, and it was really about skincare. Soon we start to see the niche color cosmetics brands coming, and we see trends like sustainability, inclusivity, green, clean, and everyone is jumping like, they're walking on, fire, just one
Right.
foot to the next, trying to stay relevant. And what I found very interesting about your presentation is throughout your entire career and your life, no matter if, you got negativity, if you only could use one photographer, if you have a small niche brand with no budget, you've always been able to stay relevant, and that's so rare. Why do you think, is there anything, from a soft skill perspective that you think that you have that has allowed you to accomplish that?
Oh, gee. Well, thank you for saying that, because I hope it's true. But I really, I think I really like to listen to people, and I like to listen to counter opinions. So I have my own opinions, and they're sometimes rather fierce. But but I do really like hearing what other people have to say and absorbing it and learning from it. So that's the only way I could survive 25 years at a Condé Nast magazine, quite honestly, because it's not like every day people are throwing roses at your feet. And the same as starting a new brand. I mean, you get a lot of criticism, and I think I can get hurt by the criticism, but I recover very quickly. I'm very resilient. But I think the other thing is that I take in what people have to say and kind of process it and try to learn from it. I feel like I'm not a finished product ever.
Okay. And then if you had to give advice to our students now coming out into the workplace, especially this summer, and looking for careers in beauty, what do you think they really need to focus on to get that opportunity in a more competitive workspace now?
I mean, I have so much empathy for anybody coming out of school right now and going to work. I know when I started my career, it was supposed to be a terrible job market, but this beats everything.
Yeah.
And so first, you have my empathy. I have a son who's graduating from UVA, and he's in the same boat. So we're all in it together. But I think that, I do think that sometimes we get very self-focused, and I think that it's really think about the needs of whoever it is, wherever you're applying, and put yourself in their shoes and think, what are they going to want from me coming out of SCAD right now? And I think that what they want from you is your creativity and your openness, and also your ability to know things like what this consumer wants, what this age consumer wants, and how she likes or he likes or they like to be spoken to. So that's an advantage. And I think that the more you can prepare and present and putting yourself in the shoes of the brand. So let's say you're interested in, I don't know, let's make it up, Glossier, and you want to be on that team because everybody does. It's such a great looking and wonderful brand. Think about what you could do in terms of their social media and prepare things. Don't just sit back and sort of wait for someone to ask you questions. Prepare a social media feed for them, or think about social media franchises, or think about things that they could do as an outreach, or think about, if you want to be in PR, what would you do? How would you send people products today? And what would be the gimmick or the extra special thing? I think the more that you can put yourself in the challenging position of the brand and how they have to market today, how would you do a campaign right now when no one can when we're all under social distancing limitations. And I'm actually working on a new campaign for a different brand right now with Look Studios, the people who did the Flesh videos. And we're so excited because it's like, okay, we've got these limitations. We can't do a shoot with anybody. This is going to be great. We're going to figure out how to do it. And it's going to be even better because of the limitations. So, but put yourself in their situation and think, how can you sell to people? How can you do email marketing? And it's really just, you actually have more to contribute than you know, and people need it, and people need fresh ideas. Mm-hmm. So go that extra mile. And if it means, presenting that over LinkedIn, you can find people on LinkedIn and send them your ideas, or you can DM people on Instagram, or I said this when I was at SCAD, and I think it's really true. If you go on a brand's Instagram that you're interested in working for, and you like their posts and you comment with wit on their posts, mm-hmm. They will end up knowing who you are if you do that every day. It's a way for you to audition. And so it's like the easiest way in the world for you to audition. Be funny, be smart, be supportive, and be on a lot of people's Instagram. They'll notice. It might just be the social team, but if it's a small brand, like for Flesh, we had one social team, and it was this one woman, and then it was all four of us, and we all were always paying attention to what was on social. So, mm-hmm. There are lots of ways that you can kind of elevate yourself. And even though it's a very difficult time right now, people always need new talent.
Absolutely. I'm taking one of the questions from the student, Daisy Terrell. Who are some of your favorite women in beauty at the moment?
Do we mean executives?
In the industry. So for instance, like CEOs, makeup artists, maybe influencers.
Yeah. Okay. And I have to think of that. Well, you have one living right nearby, Rosemary Swift. She's hilarious, of RMS Beauty. Adore her. Mm-hmm. And she's doing so many interesting things. I love Georgie Grieville, who started Milk Makeup, and she's just extremely thoughtful and really creative. I love, there's so many people. I think what Emily Weiss has done at Glossier, as you know, I think that's extraordinary. There's the woman who created Beauty Counter, whose name for the second is to escape me, but her name is Greg Renfrew. I think that's extraordinary. There's so many people. I just am constantly inspired by so many people. I don't even know where to start and where to end.
Yeah, there's some really great leadership, I think, in the industry now, and some really great brands that are doing some really interesting things. So
in terms of influencers, I do love Robin Black, who does Beauty is Boring. And then there's so many fun makeup artists I adore, Fulvia Ferolfi and Pat McGrath. I mean, I adore Pat. I've known her forever. She's so exceptional. What a great brand she's created. But I feel like I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. and go, I didn't mention this great person. So
I know that always happens. We have another question from a student, and I love this question. What are your thoughts on tech and beauty? What's coming up in the future that's going to change the industry, and we need it?
We need it really badly. Okay. So I've thought about this a lot. No one's going to shop the way they used to shop for beauty. And even before that, when I came to SCAD, and I had a lot of sessions with your color theorists about how to explain how to buy a foundation without trying on the foundation, and how to simplify that, and how to make that into something. I thought, if we could have an app, you could take a picture and then you could use a filter, and the filter could determine what the best foundation would be to match your skin. Wouldn't that be genius? There's a thing called Perfect Core. There's a makeup cam device that is trying to do that. We are not going to ever use a tester ever again. I mean, I can't say I ever used a tester in the first place, because that freaked me out on a good day. And I'm not really even a germphobe today. No, never again. So we're going to have to figure out how to buy products and without trying them on, and how to find things that match. And tech is so great for that. So it's the matching, the try on. It's still a little rudimentary right now. I still think it could stand to be perfected, but I think that those sorts of things would have so much value to the industry, to retailers, to individuals. And so, any kind of makeup application tool, also sort of instruction, like you can watch a YouTube video and try to do it, but what if there was a way to do it right for your face? I had a meeting once with the people who invented Facetune, and they are based in Israel, and they're really fascinating. And I think that they've got so much interesting technology that could be applied to something in this world. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. You know, we're constantly thinking about the product space and the consumer space, but from an industrial standpoint and a retail standpoint, you know, it's going to be very curious to see what happens to Sephora when that is the big draw of their testers and playing with product. And what is that retail solution? And I know in our non-traditional retail classes, that's something we talk about quite often. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. The next question, very, very deep, but I love this question. So you mentioned that with beauty, the idea is to avoid the trap of perfection and strive to be more human. So with the increase of social media and everyone kind of, you know, maintaining this perfect image and showing the perfect picture, how do you think that's going to, this idea that imperfection is perfection, how do you think that will continue? And do you think this affects beauty in a positive way or a negative way? Social media and this.
Yeah, you know, I'm of two minds about it, but I think that coming from the world of, you know, more traditional media, we tried to make things look pretty perfect, and it was a lot of retouching, and it had some artificiality. And then suddenly when you'd see Beyonce in a t-shirt, and maybe she was styled and she was like, it was all very thought out in the bathroom when she's dancing with her friends, but it felt more real than what we were doing in magazines. And I think that, yes, there are those influencers who use Facetune and use every filter and make themselves perfect, and there isn't a down moment. But I'm starting to feel like the popularity and the attraction to that is starting to wane. And I almost feel like some of these influencers are artificial. I think the reason we were originally attracted to them was they were real people with real personalities and real names, and they weren't. And I think some of the reasons why people left magazines and magazine brands and went and got more interested in influencers was because they felt more real and more relatable. Now they're less and less relatable because they're so overdone and so filtered, and then they all are sponsored content and everything's at sponsorship. And it's more obvious than magazines. Like people did advertising in magazines, but I didn't write nice things about them because they advertised. It's like the post is only positive, and it says it's an ad. So I feel like the interest in that is, I think, going to wane. I think particularly with what we're going through right now, that it just feels so artificial and so divorced from the reality that we're living in. And they're living in this bubble. And I think a lot of the influencers and things have gotten a lot of kickback and pushback on what they're doing. So I think we're going to have another round of this and get through it and sort of get to a different kind of reality, and a more real reality, if you will. But people don't really like fakery. And a lot of that influencer stuff is fake, and it's all artificial. And you know, they might have millions and millions of followers, but it feels, I mean, I think that I really commend the Kardashians, because it's like they brought the cameras into their houses and they fought and they showed what happened. And, you know, it was more real than you'd ever see in a movie or on a TV show. So I think that but I think there's a moment now that we're all going through, that we're connecting in this way of like, we're all isolated, we're all wearing our sweatpants, we're all like trying to figure it out, and we haven't been able to color our hair or cut our hair or whatever. We're figuring out life together, virtually in a way, and I think that that's going to have a greater desire for reality and a move farther away from the artificiality.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea behind TikTok, and I think that's why we see so much of a movement, because these are real people and they're creators and they're innovators, and you know, that realness is coming through and people are responding. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's funny. People are funny on it, and it's like, it's not like this dead perfection. It's like we're goofing around, and that's which it gives it its charm, really. Yeah.
Do you think the beauty industry will attach to TikTok the way that it did to Instagram and YouTube?
Maybe. I mean, I think they will because the audience is there and they're going to have to figure it out. But I think that you can't just go and do your own shouting. Like, I don't sometimes see like beauty brands get on there and they're like shouting at you, like, these are my, this is what my product does. It's like, you've got to play in the media the way the media wants to be heard.
Yeah.
And, I've spent time with Christy Dash, who used to work at Allure, and she's the head of brand partnerships or something. I probably had the wrong title, but at Instagram. And it's like, the more real, the more your Instagram post looks like it belongs on Instagram, that it's shot on an iPhone, that it isn't too perfect, is what works really well. And sometimes brands get so preoccupied with making everything look so perfect and their halo around their products that they're alienating themselves because they just look bad and people are going to scroll right by them. The same with TikTok. You have to belong on that platform or else you're going to just, no one's going to be interested in what you have to say or do.
Absolutely. So we have a question about Flesh and the fact that there's both beauty and skincare now. And have you noticed any changes in the categories now? Have you noticed any preference changes or consumer focus changes between the two categories?
I can only speak overall to the industry, and we know that the industry is moving towards skincare. And I think that for a number of reasons, I think that partly it was just oversaturation. There are just too many makeup products. And, how many palettes can you have where there are 60 shades of color in a palette? It's not like you're going to go through that in a month. So I think that there's just this everybody jumped on the wagon and it was just too much stuff. And so, we see this, and I know, Melanie, you talked about it too. You see the cycles that skincare was everything, and then makeup became everything, and then skincare now is gaining against makeup. And I do think that it gets back to people really want to go back to the essence of what really works and what changes. Your makeup is no good if your skin is bad, and you cannot cover up for skin problem. I mean, you can try, but you've got to get back to the source, and the source is skincare. And I think the other thing is people got tired of the science or the pseudoscience in skincare, and there was a lot of pseudoscience and a little overcomplication. And now people are really interested in, like, okay, tell me what works, tell me what this thing does. And that might actually be something that comes out of this pandemic, when all we seem to do every day is listen to Anthony Fauci. Thank God for him. He's so extraordinary. But between him and Sanjay Gupta, I feel like, I have someone to turn to. But that we want, we're getting to be very adept at scientific information in that, a very serious realm. But I still think that people want products that work and are less willing to just kind of buy the aura and buy the status. And so these things do go in cycles, but I think we're going to be returning to a cycle of performance.
Yeah. And I think body is going to be a huge growth area as well. We have another great question, a deeper question. As you've moved throughout your career, you've been at some really big companies, and as a woman, that's very difficult and has been, and we're still having this huge female movement. How did you approach being heard or getting a seat at the table throughout your career?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I did have I don't know if it's an advantage, but I worked at Condé Nast where women were really, there were women in leadership positions at Condé Nast always from, a century ago. So that was a very nice place to be as a woman because it was understood and editors were understood. But one of the interesting things in the early days for my life at Condé Nast was that, it was a great place to be because women were respected in roles of editorial, but what we were not given was any kind of budgetary responsibility. So it was great because I had no budgetary limitations, but it was kind of artificial and a little bit infantilizing. And so once I kind of got my own budget, it really is a sign of responsibility to have your budget and just stick with your budget and meet your budget. So that was part of it too. I think that my way of being heard is just sort of do all the research, to do all the work. And I know that's sometimes a flaw that women feel like they have to outperform in order to be heard and in order to feel confident. But that's just the way it was for me, that I had to kind of do extra in order to be seen and heard. And then sort of stick my neck out and take the risks that come with that.
Yeah. And then, so I know we're heading towards our hour time period, and I'm going to do one last question. And as we look at career opportunities, especially now in the beauty industry, if you had a kind of future crystal ball, what jobs do you see becoming more important in the next 5 and 10 years?
I do think the marriage of beauty and technology is a really important thing. And I think that it's not just in retail. There are ways to do it in terms of products. And, one of the things that I was thinking about and didn't answer you at that point was personalization is going to be a very, very big part of our future. And personalization is a little bit than lip service. It's like, oh, we can engrave your name on your lipstick case, but that's not really personalization. It's still the same color. And people have tried to do personalization. I think hair color is actually doing a really good job. There's E-Salon and Madison, whatever it's called, and I think it's DP Hue. I'm forgetting the name of one of them, but they figured out how to do personalized hair color, which is amazing. So you can actually have a box of hair color that's personalized. That I think is going to be a huge part of our world. And the clean and sustainable. Clean is kind of too vague a concept right now, and nobody agrees on what the definition is. But I think that as time goes on, the sustainability is going to be a huge, huge part, and to figure out how to make sustainable products is going to be a requirement, and we're going to have to sort that out. And then communication. I always think, of course, I'm biased toward creativity and communication, but I think that with each new platform and each new way that all the clutter that happens, the way that you connect with consumers and with people is incredibly valuable and always necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. We definitely have to stay in touch and catch up soon. But this was really, really amazing to hear. And I think it's nice to hear kind of what's happening in the industry, especially during these troubled times, and to hear that, there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and we do see a way kind of through this, which is great. And there's still lots happening within the beauty industry. So thank you, students, for joining us. Please stay tuned for more Guest and Gusto each week throughout the quarter. And be sure to catch On Creativity Live with President Wallace and Google's Mike Buzzard, which will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. So we'll see you next time for Guest and Gusto. And thanks again, Linda Wells. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much. Congratulations, everybody.